Are we live, Nicholas?
I believe so.
How do I sound? Do I sound crisp?
You sound lovely.
So, the Mech and Goo program
Oh
recently
boy.
held a poll, right? They held a poll. Who is the captain of the show? Right. And, it was a lot of controversy there. I'm not going to ask you who you voted for because votes are sacred.
Thank you.
Someone is upset for who I voted for. And while they hold the title of captain of the show, Nick, I am here to declare that I, Doc, am a supreme dictator and tyrant for life
Mm-hmm.
for TLDR. So that's a
Yeah.
title
I mean, this
that
is
I'm not going to have people vote for it. Why? I'm supreme dictator and tyrant. People need to vote. I'm going to
yeah.
announce it. I'm going to declare it. That's just how it is. Although we
Yeah.
might have a poll for Grand Poobah because that's a cool title. You might be able to keep that for you. It's inferior to me, so it's fine. You
I
can
just
you
want
can handle it.
my only request, if you will consider this, because you are a dictator, you don't have to listen to me. But my
I
only
won't.
request is when you intro yourself, not today, I don't want to put too much on you on the spot, but when you intro yourself going forward, you introduce yourself as Supreme Dictator, whatever the fuck you just said.
And tyrant for life.
Yeah,
Do you know what
entire for
that's
life.
from? Do you get what that reference is from?
I don't.
It's a Calvin and Hobbes reference.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Come on,
Would
son.
not get
Come on,
that.
son. Also, not to put you on the spot, but put you on the spot, Nicholas. I sent you a link earlier today to support my daughter's fundraiser, and I see you have not purchased any items yet.
I just want everybody to get a little insight into to what I have to deal with. Joe
Yeah.
texts me, sends this whole thing about don't feel like you have to do it, but
Read
like
the
if
subtext. Read the
I,
subtext.
I okay, well then you could you can subtext me all you want, but just fucking say it from the jump.
Read between. Well, Nicholas, I want to give the appearance that I am, giving you an option,
You're
but I
also a
in fact am
fool
not.
if you think I wouldn't text my wife right away. But I'm also in the office on Tuesday. So one day I have to show face. So I'm not gonna
Oh,
pull a
please.
trigger.
In the office, please. We know that you're just there for the free haircuts and the props department.
Yeah, I actually do need a
Yeah, you do need a fresh cut.
Joe
Anyways,
thinks I just dick around all day. Honest to God, which I mean, it's not entirely wrong.
I'm
But
still waiting for you to raid the merch closet and hand me some free swag.
when I find the merch closet, I'll let you know.
Large now, by the
You're
way. I
asking
don't
the
need that
wrong
XL bullshit now.
you're asking for the wrong friend to get you that works at DK to get you merchandise. Ask your other
just,
co-host.
just make it happen, will you? Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, listeners of all ages, Geeks Worldwide Radio and the Dork Shared Universe proudly presents to you the greatest, and I mean the greatest, podcasting team in the world. He's a comic book writer, Nick Friar. I am your supreme dictator and tyrant for life, Doc Fraser Gilmore. And we are the TLDR Comic Book Club, baby. Nicholas, how's it going?
Wow, you threw that in and it worked out really well. And I hate to say this, the only
That's
thing was
why I'm the boss hog, baby.
yes, and I guess you know what that means that you can continue to call me Nick Friar every time you introduce me because that's the second time you've done
Like
that.
Shelder. I didn't do it again. I'll have to
You did. You did.
Play it back. Play it back.
You know what?
Back.
If you say that I didn't do it, then if you didn't do it, then you didn't do it because you're in charge.
You're damn right.
But you know, then in that case, then maybe you should let people know. I'll do it for you. I'll be your mouth in this instance. Everybody, make sure you subscribe to our audio channels. We don't have any fireside chats planned for the month of October. That doesn't mean we won't have one pop up on us out of friggin' nowhere because that's generally how those things happen. But Fireside chats, those are conversations with creators across the industry. The only place you can find those are our audio channels. So we're talking iTunes, Spotify, Geeks Worldwide Radio, Amazon, Pocket Cast, all the major podcasting platforms. You can find us there. And again, those conversations are with writers, artists. We've had editors before too. The only place you cannot find those in video form. So if you subscribe to us on YouTube or you follow us on Twitter or Instagram to watch us live there, great. But if you want to hear conversations when we have writers and other creators on the show, you have to make sure you subscribe to one of our audio channels for those instances. We'll always let you guys know when that happens, but sometimes those pop up out of nowhere, so you never know what's going to happen. But make sure you subscribe there. Leave a 5-star rating and review while you're there. Otherwise, you're going to learn the real meaning of Backcracker. And now that he has taken on the rule of whatever the fuck from Calvin and Hobbes, he's a dictator in some capacity, it's going to be even worse. But we got a lot to get to today. We are kicking off spooky season. I am fucking pumped, Joe. I don't know about you, but I've been dying to talk about all these scary books that you and I have planned, especially the pair that you have today.
I've got a bunch of books that you've been waiting for me to talk about.
This is true.
Two of the books I'll be talking about this month are actually dropping their final issues today. So I'm excited to tease those in a bit. But yeah, I love this time of year, and we don't always like. I don't. Was it last year? We didn't get to do any. I think we had chats. We had something
We
lined
might have
up.
had chats. There was one year where we had a ton of chats. Yeah, I think so because we had Kill Your Darlings on. Yeah, that was when
Yeah.
I had dibs on
Well,
that book. We had him on, and then you got sick, and then you didn't have to do any work, and you just got the book for free.
yeah, that's facts. That's how things roll when you're the supreme dictator in Tyrant for Life. We were on the Dork program though. We did another horror book ranking,
That was
which
ours.
was a lot of fun. That was ours. That is right. Yeah. See,
Yes.
no, so that took a spooky book away. But no, I'm very excited for that. Especially to talk about the pair of books, which I don't think I've done before. Talked about sort of a collection, if you will, as a main line. So very, very excited, Nicholas.
Yeah, this is the first time that one of us will be talking about two books at once. We're also setting a career high in creators that we're going to be talking about today as well. But before we get to any of that, we got to go through the new books that are out this week. But even before that, we got to get to catching up. And I know you finally got a chance to look at Darth Vader 50, the series finale. How was it?
It was a double issue and a very
Ooh.
fitting ending. For the series. I mean, 50 issues. That's a great run for any comic book. And I know there's been there's Kieran Gillen's had a run on Darth Vader. Darth Vader has been an extraordinarily well written series uh for the better part of a decade. This iteration of it was absolutely fantastic. Great ending. And he's gonna be continuing on. They're gonna be doing some newer stuff and whatnot. So but I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, it's it's funny when you see certain like legacy titles, or just big two titles in general, where they have like a strong run of writing, even though you're seeing different creators jump in and jump out. Daredevil's always the one that comes to mind most, and that's continuing, which is wild because especially with you, because you love that Chip Zdarsky run, and now you have a different writer come in, and you've still been praising that, and you were very skeptical going in. So I haven't checked that one out yet, and I haven't checked out actually any Darth Vader comics yet. So I'll have to get on this at some point. Would you?
That
Okay,
was one of the first books I talked about on the program, Nicholas.
yeah, it is. So would you which run like this current run that you just finished, or would you or Kieran, if you were to like tell somebody which Darth Vader comic should I read? I'm putting you on the spot here, I know.
I mean, that's you talk about a fence sitter, right? Like you really
Yeah.
can't go wrong either way, right? Because they're both exceptional. I would think I would probably tell you that the one most people would tell you to go start with would be Kieran's.
Hmm.
Because it was that series that like perked my ears up for when I saw it come back, right?
Gotcha.
But you could start either. It doesn't matter, right? You could start either one and enjoy them both. I think equally. The only thing I'll say about uh, the current run, I believe it's Greg Pak, is that it got a little bogged down with the last event they had. There was a droids event, and then the last, so it got bogged down because it got sucked into that a little bit. But
Gotcha.
overall, it was excellent, excellent,
Nice.
excellent, excellent.
You know what else was excellent? Speaking of quality writing and quality artwork and whatnot, The Midnight Shadows. The trade paperback came out this past week. Of course, written by Zach Kaplan, who we've had on the show a couple times and talked with him about that title, along with the Midnight, the band that this title is named after, also wrote this with Zach. And actually, I got to see one of the band members of the Midnight, Tim McEwen, along with Zach, over at Newberry Comics in Boston when they were doing signings. I couldn't believe it. Like I understand he's traveling with like a band where they probably have like, it's a little bit easier for them to bop around from like, from major city to major city, but it was like Philadelphia one day, Boston another day, Baltimore, then New York. I mean, look, I understand that, New England and I know New York's not New England, but the Northeast isn't like the biggest, but at the same like biggest area, in the US, but still that's a fucking lot of jump around over a short period of time. As for the book, I have finished it. We had gotten a chance to read that first chapter when we had Zach on the show previously. And the biggest thing that kind of jumps out is like it hits you with nostalgia. Like anybody who's like looking for new things that give you that nostalgic feel, absolutely got to check out the Midnight Shadows. And also, like the thing that I was most impressed about was while it's giving you that nostalgic feel, there's also commentary on that nostalgic feel as well. That's what this whole story pretty much is about. I highly recommend this for anybody who's into stories that are set in the 80s. It's got that neon vibe and everything. I had so much fun reading this. And on top of that, I was also listening to their album Nocturnal, which there's a few song titles that like you see pop up in this that are very apparent. I mean, Shadows is I believe the first song on that album too. So if you're capable of listening to music in some capacity while you're reading comics, not everybody can do that. It's not. I don't know. That's just the way my brain works. I highly recommend doing that if you're able to, because it really enhanced the experience for me. But yeah, Midnight Shadows. Make sure you go check out that trade paperback if you haven't picked it up already.
Yeah, quintessential 80s sci-fi, retro gaming, just fun shit.
Yeah, it has got it all in there. All right, let's get to the new comics that are out this week. We got a ton of books coming out from Marvel per usual, and DC for that matter. What do you got for me from Marvel though?
All right, from Marvel Comics, we have The Amazing Spider-Man issue 59, The Ultimates issue 5, Venom issue 38, Fantastic Four issue 26, Exceptional, not Exception, X-Men issue 2. We have X-Force issue 4, Phoenix issue 4, Spider-Man Black Suit and Blood issue 3, Venom War Wolverine issue 2, Ahsoka issue 4, Marvel Zombies Dawn of Decay issue 2, X-Men From the Ashes Infinity Comic issue 18, Sentinels issue 1 written by Alex Packnadel. We have Blade 1, we have Conquest 2099 issue 1, and Ewoks issue 1.
Which everybody's
or
been clamoring.
Ewoks.
Everybody's been clamoring for the Ewoks, of course. From DC, we got Action Comics 1070, Batman Gotham by Gaslight, The Kryptonian Age, issue 5, DC versus Vampires World War V, issue 3, which I am reading, Batman Wayne Family Values, issue 133, Mad, issue 40, Green Lantern Civil War Special, issue 1. Then we got Batman Full Moon, issue 1. This is my friend of the show, Rodney Barnes, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to read it, but I will definitely get on that as soon as possible.
And then we have Absolute Batman issue 1, the highly anticipated Absolute Batman issue 1. And the only reason that we're not breaking it down further is we already did it in the solicit. So you guys can check that out. And that, I mean, is there, you know what? I say that. I'm not adding anything because I've said pretty much what I need to say. It's really fun. I think people will really enjoy it. I understand all the conversation that's been around the logo, but if you get past that, you're gonna have a fun time with this first issue. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add after what we already said about it?
Well, I don't want to say anything without you jumping down my friggin' throat again, you know?
I think it was
I
all
didn't
in.
spoil anything, by the way. No, it's awesome. You're gonna love it, just like the guy from Men's Warehouse used to say. It's Scott Snyder, right? So it's already, when you're reading a Scott Snyder book, I think at this point, as a reader, you have a certain expectation, right? There's a threshold, that you expect from him to sort of, reach and meet and crash through, and he does that here. And all I'll say is that there's some characters in here that you're going to read and you go, I love what he did there. I love his interpretation of this character. And like you said, like small nuanced little art things aside, right, which might or might not be your cup of tea, like don't let that hinder you from enjoying this book, because it really is excellent.
Yeah, yeah. Well said, sir. And you catch your breath because you got to tell the people about Batman and Robin issue 14, which this is the start of Phil Kennedy Johnson and Javier Fernandez taking over this title, right?
Yeah, you just mentioned like taking over a series, from when one
Hmm.
sort of prolific writer writes it and then someone else has to step in. And so, Joshua Williamson had been writing Robin for the better part of 2 to 3 years, right? And the first it was Robin, and then it was Batman and Robin. And Joshua Williamson has had such a awesome command of Damian Wayne. because before that I couldn't stand the character. He was, and I know I'm talking about a fucking comic book character here, but he was such a little piece of shit, right? Like I annoyed the hell out of me. I didn't enjoy reading him. But Joshua Williamson has found a way to sort of like humble, and to still kind of keep Damian sort of brash, arrogant. He's a little less smug, which is probably what, like, the iterations before him I probably didn't like, because I can't stand smugness. But there's still that, that brooding, moody, brash teenager to the character. And so now you've got Philip Kennedy Johnson, taking over, and Javier Fernandez on art. And it didn't skip a beat, right?
Nice.
Like the tone is similar in a way, but like if you're at all familiar with Philip Kennedy Johnson's work, there's a grittiness to his writing and his dialogue and the way his storytelling, and you very much get that Philip Kennedy Johnson feel to this, while it's continuing on from where the story was previous, and it doesn't feel like it's skipping a beat, but you do get that distinct different tone with it. And then Javier Fernandez's art, I mean, it's epic, and he's very well suited for Batman and these characters. So this was a great issue. I know it's issue 14. I'm glad that they didn't just can it and start from issue 1 again. They're kind of keeping the numbering on. It's a little thing like that. So it's great because it's a good starting on point. If you hadn't been reading Batman and Robin before, you can read this and not be completely lost. But also, like, they do sort of like fill you in a little bit on what's been going on, prior to it. So excellent first issue by Philip Kennedy Johnson here on Batman and Robin.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, I mean, and you're right. Like, just continuing forward with issue 14, just a small little touch, but says a lot about where the title has been and how they envision the title going forward, and the strength of the readership as well, where they don't have to go and reset things. I love that. It's like it's a small sign, but it's a really strong sign. Catch your breath again. I'm going to take us through Boom because you got a Boom book that you want to talk about. Minor Arcana issue 2. Of course, that's Jeff Lemire, which Joe does not have dibs on. I totally stole this one from him the second that I saw it. Did not hesitate. I did enjoy this issue.
That's why you're only a poobah and not a supreme dictator entitled for life.
Exactly. I did enjoy this issue. Didn't give me a lot to break down for this week, so that's why I'm not going, talking about it all. But very excited to read the third issue after reading this one. I Heart Skull Crusher issue 6, Garfield issue 3, the Armory Wars, Good Apollo, I'm Burning Star. Is it I'm or im Burning Star? I'm sorry. Like this, I'm okay. I know it's a small punctuation thing, but who the hell knows with space stuff? So I'm Burning Star 4, Volume 2, Issue 6. That is all time. That is the most ridiculous one that we've dealt with so far. My goodness. But then you have a title that's much more succinct, and a book that you're going to be talking about later in this month in greater detail.
Yeah, and we're going to go right back to Philip Kennedy Johnson, baby. This is Crocodile Black issue 5. The first issue of this series blew me away. Dibsed it immediately, right? And I've had this circled potentially for spooky season for a while, and I'm pleased as punch that it's finishing today, or by the time you're listening to this, so that when the next mainline issue, TLDR 103, I will be able to discuss it in full, because this is a tremendous horror story. Right. It is a book about mental illness, where you're watching let me rephrase. It's not necessarily a book about mental illness. The main character is dealing with mental illness.
Gotcha.
And the hold that it has on him, the violent, prolific journey that it takes him on throughout the course of this issue, or this series, I should say. It is a deep dive into madness in psychosis, and it is not one to shy away from brutal violence. This is I can't wait to dive into it deeper, because it was epic right from the rip, right from the first page. But it was, when I first read it, I thought it was going to go down a slightly different path. But once they said nope, we're taking it to 11, it didn't stop. It was 0 to 100 all the way through. As I like to say, high octane storytelling, violence, and then sadness, all they're wrapped up in one brilliant story.
I feel like this has an obvious answer to it, but I need to ask still. This is a candidate for book of the year, right?
It's a candidate. Oh, for sure, it's a candidate. There's another book on here that I'll be talking about. This spooky season as well. That's also a candidate for
Okay.
book of the year as well. So like it's starting to shape up. I've got like it's gonna be tough whittling them down because I've got about 5 to 8 books already just sort of circulating, and I haven't even really studied all the
Mm-hmm.
books yet. But there's like 5 to 8 I can think of off the top of my head that are going to be real strong candidates.
Yeah, I mean, I know Kill All Immortals is one that we've talked about a ton, and that's going to be a candidate for both of us. So there's another one that I know that's on your list for sure. Speaking of Dark Horse Comics, we got Star Wars: The High Republic Adventures, Saber for Hire, issue 4. Star Wars: The High Republic Adventures, Echoes of Fear, issue 2. Uh,
Wortha, come on, come on.
Swartha, excuse me. Duck and Cover, issue 2. Sturthra, not Swartha, because you forgot the W in there.
No, there was no
Dispatch.
W. No W on that one.
What the hell?
Oh,
Okay.
wait, never mind. Yes, there was a W. I forgot that.
Yeah.
That's my bad. It's the A that's not always there. It's not
Star
always
Wars
in adventures.
Star
That's
Wars:
what
High
it is.
Republic Adventures. Yeah, that makes sense. Dispatches from the Occlusion Zone, issue 1, and then we got another first issue, and I'll take the lead on this one, Joe. Seance in the Asylum, issue 1. This is written by Clay McLeod Chapman and drawn by Leonardo Marcello Grassi with colors by Mauro Goma, who I wanted to make sure I specifically noted. We don't always talk about the colors when we're doing single issues, but I really enjoyed the faded colors that Mauro brought to this series, and it totally fits too for the setting and everything. But I will say too, before I get into like the actual anything going on in the interior, I saw Andrea Moody's cover, and I was like, oh, I gotta check this out like right away. I didn't
Mhm.
even, and Andrea is not doing the interior art, totally fine. But as soon as I saw that, I was like, if Andrea Moody's doing the cover, that's got to be a pretty good sign, right? If it's the main cover. And I was not disappointed at all, because then I get in and I see the credits page, Joe. And you remember when I called, and I didn't call dibs on this. I wanted you to check it out. I think it's a fun book that for both of us to check out. But I saw the credits page and I thought of Where Monsters Lie, because
Mhm.
they do something similar, but obviously specific to this story, with the credits, with the writer, artist, and whatnot. So I had a lot of fun just right away. It's like, okay, cool cover. All right, we're getting into it right away with the credits page, and then perfect time for this series to
Oh,
begin. I'm always kind of feeling like horror comics should start in September just to capitalize on the spooky season. But at the same time, for us, we're going to keep reading it. We read horror stuff year round. It does not matter. But for me, it really scratches an itch, because we're dealing with a medium who's employed to help patients at an asylum post Civil War. I mean, if you like spooky shit, I don't know like what else you need to friggin' hear. The only other thing I want to note before you start talking about it, Joe, is there's a lot of dream state type stuff that we see in this story too, and I really feel like Leonardo Marcello Grassi does a nice job of kind of bouncing between the two, where it's like, it's in the same story. It's not this crazy leap, but it's also very apparent that this is not like now in the present when we're in those dream states.
yeah, the premise is excellent. The way the story is told is excellent. But for me, the real standout was the art, right? Because you felt like you were in an asylum, right? There is a sketchiness, there's
Yeah.
a rawness that I think plays well when you're one drawing a horror story, but for that particular setting, like in an asylum, like I find for me personally that sort of art style where it's not like over refined, not very, clean in the sense that like it's not Dan Mora-esque, right? Right. It's very
Mhm.
sketchy, it's very raw, it's very gritty. And the two settings for me where that plays best is like a story that's taking place in the woods, right? Um, or a setting like this, like asylum, haunted house, something like that. Because to me, there is something just inherently terrifying about those two settings, especially when you're telling a horror story. And that type of art style, I think, really just ratchets everything up, a notch, and you're just sort of immersed into it. So everything about this first issue was fantastic. And you mentioned before with Crocodile Black being in contention for book of the year. Here we are again, Dark Horse having a friggin' absolute banger of a year,
Mhm.
and giving us another book that's helping them, solidify their footing as potential publisher of the year.
Yeah, 100%. Because while we've said before, and we'll continue to repeat this just so everybody's aware, any book that starts in October is not in consideration for book of the year for that year. It'll be in consideration next year. This still helps any publisher's case
Mm-hmm.
for publisher of the year, because that's all within that year. Because we
100%.
want to take a look at everything. So yeah, well said. Like, for say, it's right now for us, it is a two horse race. We're both on the same page there. The question is who's going to end up pulling ahead at the end. But speaking of, we talk about one horse. Then there's the other one right there, ready to go, which has 2 books out this week. Mad Cave Studios, Sanction 5. You're not talking about that this week, but you're going to talk about it this month too.
Darn right I am. Holy cow! I mean, Dark Horse and Mad Cave right now. It is a 2-horse race, right? And they are neck and neck. And Sanction has been. This was a series that you read the first issue and you said, "Yeah, you can have it."
I saw so okay. This is like old Nick popping up. Like, I saw the cover art and it was Dan Panosian, which, I mean, like, by the way, like, when it comes to cover arts of the year, I feel like we know it's a fucking landslide. I feel comfortable saying that now. Dan has had an absolute banana land year. But that's a conversation for later on in the year. But I saw
Yeah.
his art for some reason. Just like, I went and saw the interior and I was like, it's just so different than Dan's, and it's really fucking with me. And that's where I kind of like just stepped away from it, and then you went and read it. But that's what this show is about. Like, when we make dumb decisions or something misses our radar, the other guy almost always catches it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this will be a fun one because this one isn't like, So I've got, and especially with the books I'm talking about later on today, like out of all the books so far, like Crocodile Black will be the most horror-ish, horror
Okay.
book I discuss. Like Sanction 5. The books I'm talking about later are more like, there's serial killers involved,
Mm-hmm.
or right, there's like a murder mystery. So it's
Yeah.
more along. I'm trending down that road a little bit more with the books I've chosen for this month. But like Sanction 5, I can't wait. That ended again as well, and it was fantastic. Such a great ending. An ending I didn't really see coming, although I probably should have. But I was just so immersed in in the story that I didn't see it, but I also thought it was done really well.
Yeah. Nice. Speaking
Yeah.
of good endings that you didn't see coming, Kingdom issue 1.
Oh,
I wasn't ready for that ending. And this has neither of us have called dibs on this one either. We're both like already getting in the giving season, the generous season. It's not that time of year yet. But look at us. This has the makings of a comedic whodunit. I'm very much in on it. When I read it too, because I did check it out. I think before you did, we were flip flop on this, between that and what the heck was it? Seance in the Asylum. But I read this and I was like, Joe's gonna enjoy this. Like, because I know you love a good whodunit. This is written by Fred Van Lent, by the way, with art by Chris Panda. And this is of all the art that we saw this in the books that we're breaking down this week. To me, this was some of the cleanest stuff that we saw, and that
mhm.
goes for the colors as well. But this first issue, we spent a lot of time getting to know the main character, Tanith, and where she works at this amusement park or theme park, whatever you want to call it, called Storybook Kingdom. I don't want to encourage trade waiting while we're talking about a first issue of a book, but I will say, after reading this first issue, if this is like a representative of how the pacing of this series, when the trade comes out, for anybody who does trade wait, they're going to read this thing so goddamn fast.
Yeah, they're gonna fly through it, and I love it too because it's it's murder mystery, it's satire. I love that the setting is like a Disneyland type amusement park where everything is like, don't break character. Everything is like so serious. And I love the main character, Tanith. She's great. I love her sidekick. I can't remember his name, but um, there, there was a moment in this, right in the beginning where I literally laughed out loud. And it was the guy with the container. I won't say anything more than that. Um, but
Yeah.
I friggin' chuckled out loud, sitting by myself reading that today. This is a wonderful first issue. This is going to be I feel a wonderfully horrific story that yeah, I'm glad we both read No One Has Dibs so that we can just keep reading it because I'm going to have a lot of fun.
Yeah, it has a lot of promise. So definitely want to check out Murder Kingdom issue 1 at your local comic shop this week. We got a few other to get to before we get to Image. I'll take us through those before you wrap us up with Image, Joe. So from CEX, we got 7 Years in Darkness, Volume 2, Year 2. Issue 3 is out this week. Joe talked about that on the show previously. An outstanding series. Would have been a great spooky season book, but you were being unselfish for me at least in making sure that I could read that as fast as possible. And we are both neck and neck right now in terms of being on top of that. From IDW, we got Godzilla, Here There Be Dragons, Volume 2, Sons of Giants, Issue 4, The Rocketeer Breaks Free, Issue 3, Monster High, Halloween Special, Issue 1. From Vault, we got Something Crawled Out, Issue 2. We don't have the review copy for this, but I do have dibs on this series. From Distillery, we got Life, Issue 2. From Oni, we got The Autumn Kingdom, Issue 2. From Dynamite, we got Space Ghost issue 6, Johnny Quest issue 3, Vampirella issue 672, and then the first issue of The Terminator by friend of the show, Declan Shalvey, who has been crushing it over at Dynamite with Thundercats as well. We talked about nostalgia stuff earlier when we were doing catching up and talking about the Midnight Shadows. There's no shortage of nostalgia and member berries going on over at Dynamite. The same can, well,
Remember?
no, there's some,
Remember?
there's
Remember?
there is some nostalgia coming out of Image and Skybound too. Why don't you take us through that?
Yes, we have Transformers issue 13 and Scarlet issue 5. Both those books, of course, are part of the Energon universe. We have Geiger issue 7, Gunslinger Spawn issue 36, The Scorched issue 34. It's the Big Poppy issue. Public Domain issue 9. Did you read that yet, Nicholas?
Yeah.
Oh, man,
Yeah,
was that a
what an
dizzy of an
ending.
issue. What an arc. What an arc. But that
Yeah.
ending, didn't see that. Talk about didn't see it coming. Did not see that coming.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Tip's going wild with this shit, man.
Right, he is. He's having a ball. Sam and Twitch Case Files issue 7, Precious Metal issue 5, Plastic Death and Dolls issue 5, which is the end of that the end of that arc, which is part of the Plastic universe. That man, that was a wild series. That was a wild ending. Lady Machinka, the
Mechanica.
Devil in Mechanica. Jesus Christ, Joseph, Mechanica. Second time in a row I've botched that up. The Devil in the Lake issue 2, Lore Remastered issue 3, and The Last Mermaid trade paperback is out this week. So, Nicholas, that takes me to the books I'm discussing this week. And I've been dying to talk about both of these. And I probably should have talked about it sooner, but we had, chats and other things pop up. And I thought, you know what, this would actually be a good way to kick off spooky season. And as I alluded to before, this isn't like a typical horror type story, but it to me, it fits the month, it fits the setting. So the books that I am discussing are The One Hand and The Six Fingers from Image Comics. And so bear with me here. We've got writers Ram V for The One Hand and Dan Waters for The Six Fingers, two of the best writers going right now, with art by Lawrence Campbell for The One Hand and Sumit Kumar for The Six Fingers. And then the colorist for both is Lee Luthridge, and the letterer for both is Aditya Bidikar, which I love. I love that there was that cohesiveness with both these books.
That's smart.
So quick synopsis, and this is great because these are two separate books, but it's telling one story. So the one hand, Ari pursues his quarry down the rain-soaked streets of Neo Novena. Ari will stop at nothing to unravel the secrets and ciphers of this case, but each revelation only leads further into the dark heart of his future metropolis and Ari's own beleaguered soul. For the Six Fingers, Johannes seeks refuge in the rain-soaked streets of Neo Novena. He will stop at nothing to unravel the secrets and ciphers of what he did and why he did it. But each revelation only leads further into the dark heart of his future metropolis and Johannes's own heartbroken soul. Right. So
Right.
I did that on I cut the synopsis down to give you just those two segments of each to show you how they're a little bit different, but also the same. And
Yeah.
that is, the heart of what makes. I really, these are two separate books, but I consider them one. So if, for example, I were to give this book of the year, I would give it to both of them
Sure.
as one thing, right? Uh, that's just
Understandable.
how interconnected they are, right? Uh, so it's a total of 10 issues, 5 of each. And so what I loved about this is that each book came out once a month, but in 1 week of the month, you'd get the one hand, and then the next week you would get the Six Fingers. And then a month would go by, right? Boom, boom, boom. So that way you could read them back to back. And this is a neo noir futuristic story that's told from two perspectives, as I just sort of alluded to there in the synopsis. You have the perspective of the protagonist, who is Detective Ari, and then you have the point of view from the killer, the protagonist there, Johannes. And the best way to describe this book, it's sort of like if Matrix / Blade Runner met, say, Seven or Silence of the Lambs, right? Like that type of
Oh.
cat and mouse sort of serial killer murder story, but the setting of something of a Blade Runner or a Matrix, right? Sort of that futuristic neo noir sort of setting. So like all that stuff is like so in my wheelhouse, Nicholas. Um, it's not even funny. And it really revolves around Detective Ari Nasser, who he's about to retire. Just when I think about they pull me back in, right? Sort of thing. And a murder occurs, and it follows the same MO as the one-hand killer, right? So this is just sort of your typical, hard-boiled detective who, either you solved a big case early on, it defined his career, and he's ridden off the coattails, or sort of like the detective that's been chasing the serial killer for a very long time, never caught him, and this is sort of his last big break. This is sort of the former, right, where Detective Nasser, sort of caught the one hand killer, and that defined his career. He's about to retire, and then a murder happens following the MO. Well, the killer that he caught is still in prison. Did he catch the wrong guy? Is this a copycat? So right off the bat, you've got a lot of intrigue, and mystery. Right, is just flowing right out your ears. And so this, what you get is you've got a series throughout, the first few issues, at least of the one hand, of these unrelated killings, with these weird symbols, at the murder scene, drawn in blood, and they're very meticulously done. Like the killer took their time. And I remember looking at it, trying to see if I could figure out some sort of pattern, sort of like one of those 3D magic art things, which I still to this day, I still can't solve. So I'm staring at my comic like a lunatic, trying to see if something will pop out at me. But that's part of the story, right? Like the ciphers that was mentioned, in the synopsis, of both the one hand and the Six Fingers. And so there's another element of intrigue and mystery that is woven into the story. And so, like, what does it all mean? And what's really beautiful about the way that the story was created and the way that it was published and put out was that you would read, say, issue 1 of The One Hand, and you would be getting everything from Detective Nasser's, point of view. And you really had to pay attention to the background, the art, and the characters, because then the following week, when you'd get issue 1, say, of The Six Fingers, and now you're seeing things from the point of view of Johannes. Um, you're getting different scenes, but they come together, they cross paths, right, in various subtle different ways. Sometimes it's very obvious where there's a scene where there's an art show, and the two literally cross each other, right, and have no idea of each other, but they're at the same place, the same time, for completely different reasons. And like that added another layer of suspense. I was thinking about, over the past couple of days, how I talk about this book and try and find ways to talk about it in sort of a non-spoilerly way. And I think one of the things I love about mystery novels, right, is that cat and mouse aspect to it, like that Sherlock Holmes, right, sort of aspect to things. And also like the big reveal, right? You know, whether it's a Sherlock Holmes book or any other type of mystery, you've got your detective or whomever, right? Trying to running down the clues, coming up with different hypotheses, using different means to figure out, like, put the puzzle pieces together. And then the climax of the story is always when, boom, the detective or whomever solves it, puts it together, and then you get the reveal of who the killer is. In this, you get it right away, right? But it's done in such a way where you know who it is, but you still have, like, you're still seeing it from the other person's perspective, and they still don't know, right? And so it's just like, it's this very layered thing that is woven together, and then finally, when it's all pulled together, you still get that satisfaction of that big reveal of when the protagonist puts it together. But then they each also have their own awesome subtle reveal, right? And something that they discover, um, either about themselves or about the world they live in, right? And it's like, it is so effing good, Nicholas. Like, I just, like, you have to read it, and to me, right, you have to read it issue 1, issue 1, issue 2, issue 2, issue 3, issue 3, issue 4, issue 4, issue 5, issue 5, right? You have to read them concurrently like that. You could very easily rip through The One Hand by itself and rip through The Six Fingers by itself, and still enjoy it. But for me, I like seeing the juxtaposition, right, um, of each character's point of view and the storytelling done at the same time, right, in real time. To me, that just adds so much charm, and gives this story and this comic something unique that you don't get, from other comics. And so, like, that just in general, was I think just so brilliantly done. I mean, the the other thing that blew me away too, and we've had co-creators of books on before, like Tim Daniel and DB Andre, for example, right, where you've got two writers, two people writing a story. Same thing with, um, Kill Your Darlings, and the Infernals, right, where you've got a couple of different writers, but it feels like one voice. To me, that is a very special talent, right? Because you've got two people who might approach writing differently, who might story tell, in different ways. But if you can get two different people to come at a story and have it sound like one voice, I think you've accomplished something. Now, in this case, you've got two different creators in Ram and Dan telling their own story, but it all still sounds like one voice. To capture that between two different comics, I mean, obviously they were working together, like they created this together, they were working together, right? But still, they're two separate entities. And you get Ram's distinct storytelling and voice in his book, and you've got Dan and his way, and his wonderful way of storytelling in his book. But again, you don't skip a beat there. And I think part of that too is having the same colorist and having the same letterer, right, creating that cohesiveness between the two books. And The same goes with the art, right? With Sumit and the old man moment, Lawrence, right? Where again, two completely different artists, but they capture the same tone, right? Again, you just feel like you're reading one book, which is amazing, absolutely amazing. And again, I think the having the one colorist helps that. If you had a different colorist on each book, you would lose that. You would lose that cohesiveness of this try of being sort of one big story. So that was a brilliant move, to do that. And like I said, this is a massive contender for Book of the Year, and the cat and mouse game that goes on, it really does come down to the end. Like as a reader, so you might think that like that takes some wind out of the sails because you already know. It doesn't. It doesn't, because you're still waiting for that moment for this character to catch up to the other one, right? And vice versa. To be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean that's Brett. When you said that earlier, and because obviously you've talked about this book in some capacity for a while it was ongoing, and I was just dying as you were talking about it because it was just such a great dibs call by you. But when you hear like, oh, they tell you that this big, anytime I hear like, oh, this big detail gets shared right in the first issue, this massive major thing that you would think would be later on in the story, to me, that's always like, this is going to be a fucking really, really good story because they're taking their big card, their big thing that they can play, maybe not at the end, but they can play it later on in the story, and they're doing it right now. They're not reliant on that. They, like, to me, there's just like a next level of command with the story when you see that done. It doesn't mean every time. I don't know of a time personally that didn't work out well for a story as it went along, but from my like if so it's not a guarantee, but I do feel like usually that's a very promising sign.
Yeah, and the character work, both characters are just, they're so complex, and getting their backstories, and again how it all, because it comes together in a couple of different ways, right? So you don't just get that big reveal of one catching the other. There's more. There's a lot more to it, which isn't given away early on. So just all around, um, this book got a lot of hype, before it was released because of the style. It is worth every bit of hype that it got, and I think it was maybe even underhyped. This book is
Mm.
excellent. I hate
That's
to, I don't like to be one that just is like, makes these grand proclamations and speak in hyperbole, um, because that can sometimes bite you in the ass, because it gets, in the end of the day, this is all subjective. But when I say that this really is a masterclass in storytelling, that's exactly what this is. It's a masterclass in comic book and just in general storytelling. This would make Nicholas an excellent movie.
movie. Okay,
Excellent
I was
movie.
going to ask about that because I was like, it sounds like it would be harder to decipher, not necessarily in a bad way. I could see it going either way, but movie is where you'd lean.
I would 100%, because like I said, like I could see this being a movie like Seven, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Or
There you go.
Silence of the Lambs, right? Like where you've got like just so good.
Now, just for those wondering at home when they can get their hands on it if they haven't had the single issues, it looks like, at least according to League of Comic Geeks, it's going to be coming out on December 10th, and it will be coming out all as one, the one hand and the fingers, one single trade paperback. So if you have been trade waiting, you're going to get it all in one fell swoop. Which I'm very excited. So I'll probably wait till then to pick it up because obviously I've been waiting on you
And,
to.
and and I really hope they tell it in that linear story and not break it up at like, you know what I mean?
If they
Um,
don't, I will probably go out of my way to try and figure out how to navigate that to read it in the same way that you read it, because obviously it
yeah.
was so impactful for you. Now, for me, speaking of things being released in interesting ways, something that actually kind of snuck by us is the book I'm talking about today, Denizen, which is from Vault Comics, of course, written by friends of the show, DB Andre and Tim Daniel, who Joe alluded to earlier. The artist on this is Chris Sheehan. colors by Jason Wordy, and letters by Ann World Designs. This came out in 4 chapters, but through Vault's Nightfall double feature. So it was like you would get 2 stories in that. So this one actually snuck by me originally when I saw the trade come out and saw that Tim and DB were doing it. I was like, I have to check this out. I absolutely have to read this thing, and I obviously loved it. So I've been part of the reason why I've been so excited for spooky season was to talk about this one right off the rip. This was the number one thing that I was going to be checking. Now, Denizen, a word that maybe people haven't heard before. I certainly haven't heard before, but I don't want to speak for everybody. Joe, have you ever heard of the word denizen before?
I've heard of venison.
Okay, so we're on the same page. I have the definition from Google, and I think that's important because it really sets a tone for what the rest of the story is. So there's the first definition you find is an inhabitant or occupant of a particular place. Doesn't exactly fit, but the second one, which seemed to be more of the British definition, was a foreigner allowed certain rights in the adopted country. That is very much appropriate for what's going on with the story, and I'll explain more as we go along. But first, the synopsis. The desert is a cruel and terrible place. This is a place of truth. A family's cross-country road trip goes off the map and into the unforgiving wilds of Joshua Tree National Park, where mom and wife-to-be Helen succumbs to a malevolent supernatural force tucked inside an abandoned camping trailer that shatters her consciousness and threatens the sanity of the entire family. I would say that pretty much sums it up right there, all in one. Obviously, this is for the synopsis for the trade, so that's why it's getting it all together real nice in a wrapped up in a bow. But the characters in this, we mentioned Helen Gardner, soon to be wife of Richard and the mother of 2 girls, and soon to be a stepmother as well. Then we have Richard Carter, who is the soon to be husband of Helen, and he is a widower, which is significant and comes up in the course of the story. Not something I'm going to be hitting on much today because I don't. That's a little bit later on in the story, but still worth noting. Then we have Maya Gardner, who is Helen's youngest daughter, who, when you look at the cover art, or if you follow us on Instagram and you saw what Joe put together for TLDR mainline, you'll see the cover art for this book for the trade. That's
Terrifying.
the girl that you see on the cover. Yeah, I mean, that's honestly, when I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, I have to read this. Absolutely, 100%. Then we have Lily Gardner, who's Helen's oldest daughter. And then we have Brian Carter, who's Richard's son. He's much older than Lily and Maya. Maya's, I think, 12. Lily's probably like 15. And then Brian is probably in his 20s, something like that. They may have mentioned it specifically in the story, but at least that general range is right. Brian is a character who we don't see quite as much necessarily in all of this, but he does have a role to play.
What about Anson Carter?
No Anson Carter. None of the other. I'm not going to. There's plenty of Carters I can go down. No Jimmy Carter. Anyways, there are other individuals that pop up throughout the course of this. The Gardner girls and then Richard Carter are the main focus of all of this, though. And I feel like talking too much about anybody else would be flirting with spoilers. Now, this is the second Tim Daniel book that I have mentioned on this show. Previously, I discussed The Plot, which is also from Vault. And then we obviously had Tim and DB on previously to talk about Morningstar. That is from Mad Cave Studios. In both of those books, they talk about family. And in this book, they talk about family. But what's so interesting is that, like, right off the rip, is we're not like each one is talking about a different type of family. Like, we see like people who like movies or writers that will talk about family dynamics, and there's plenty of different family dynamics to deal with, but also like different makeups of a family is not always the same. Like in The Plot, you have 2 kids who are orphaned and they have to deal with their degenerate uncle. And then he's going through his own thing, his relationship with his brother, his relationship with his father. In Morningstar, obviously we're dealing with a widow in that instance. And then the kids obviously having to deal with that trauma as well. This instance, we have a widower coming in and he has his older son who's kind of doing his own thing. And then we have a divorcee, if I'm not mistaken, or at least they're not married anymore at minimum, or maybe never got married, I should say.
A sauce divorcee?
Yeah, two. I don't know about that. Well, they do talk about it in some capacity, and then you have her two daughters, Helen's two daughters. So you have this mixed family, and they're about to make it official because they're en route to getting married. Not specifically in this story, but they talk about that right off of the rip. And I like so you have a blended family here, and to me, it's just like the ability to be able to because like I mean, as much as we go through different dynamics with our families throughout the course of our life, you only got one family. And I mean, yeah, sure, you have like maybe your significant other or other families you spend a significant time with throughout your life. But writing about that stuff, I mean, I just feel like that's not always easy to necessarily get right. And I feel like with all three that I've read from Tim and DB, they absolutely knock it out of the park with hitting on those dynamics, which I think is massive.
Also, oh, what's the DB Resonant,
President,
right? Also deals with family, right,
so
and
there
the
you go.
importance of of family and survival and all that. So yeah, I fucking love those two guys.
Yeah, they're great. And I mean, I so knowing that they do all this, they do a great job about writing about families and different types of families. I wondered, what are they talking about going into this? Like, I'm excited for the plot, but what is the commentary that they're providing here? And I understand for plenty, most people like you're just there to be entertained, and I get that. Like generally speaking, I am, but these guys do such a good job of hitting on those different dynamics and kind of for some people, like if you're dealing with maybe a dynamic that just kind of you've dealt with that hits closer to home, maybe for you, it'll hit you in a different way than it will for me. But I feel like I'm getting more insight into some of these different dynamics that different families have to deal with. So that element is very much at play here. And then like what this family walks into and what it forces them to work through is so fucking intense. Like it is you know, uh, without like we all like again, we all have our own different dynamics. And as much as this is not the type of family that I was raised in, there's elements that are in this story that are still familiar. That it's just like, damn, man, like you feel some of that stuff, and that's what I think part of the brilliance of their writing too is like again, this is all three of these families are not like the families that I've dealt with, but each one I can relate to and appreciate in some capacity, and they always manage to strike a chord in some capacity for me. So from a writing standpoint, outstanding. And obviously, I mean, this thing reads really well. It has great pacing to it. And then we get into the art. And obviously, we've talked about Christian quite a bit on this show. Most recently, talking about Dark Empty Void, which he's doing with the aforementioned Zach Kaplan over at Mad Cave Studios. The first time ever talked about on the show was the Autumnal, which you talked about, which is also from Vault, an amazing spooky season book for those if you have not read that yet. And he knows how to make you feel uneasy, and this art is friggin' chilling, dude. I mean, that the cover really sets the tone nicely. And like it's and quite honestly, like it set a pretty high bar for me going into it because I'm like that's really uncomfortable. I mean, I have it the physical copy right next to me, and I mean, unfortunately, the character is green screened out. Maya's green
I
screened
don't
out.
know. It kind of makes it spookier, to be honest
Yeah,
with you.
you can see her eyes when I hold it real
Oh,
close
that's
to the
freaking
camera.
terrifying. Take it
Yeah.
away.
So it's like that, but her eyes are just like, God damn. And we talk about movement in comics all the time and how artists are able to create that. And we've seen it in varying capacities. And it's so cool when it's done well. And there's multiple ways you can, I don't think there's any limitation in terms of doing it well. But I also think, especially with horror books, capturing stillness in an effective manner with the artwork is so powerful. And personally, for me, like with a horror book, that's the shit that's gonna send a fucking chill down your spine. And it's all like you can have it in moments in like in horror movies where you have like stillness in the background. That's the stuff that's gonna fuck with me. But in comics, I don't know if that's necessarily as easy to do, like have it in the background be a thing because you're so drawn to the foreground and it's just it may not have that same to me, like off the top of my head, doesn't have that same weight. So you have to do it with what's right in front of you, and do it in those moments. Like that is where Christian was thriving throughout the course of this story. It's just so powerful. And then with Wordy's colors, and Jason Wordy, we talked about previously with Morningstar, like when we had Tim and DB on the show, and I think looking at what he did with Morningstar and looking at what he did with Denizen, like you can see, okay, like this is like finding out it was the same artist because I actually didn't register that when I was reading it. When I found out it was the same color, so I was like, okay, that makes sense. But at the same time, he differentiates himself very much so where it really fits nicely with Sheehan, with the tone of the story. I mean, it plays a major part in setting the tone for the story. So while I see the through line with Wordy's artwork, I it very much like I think to the average person, they're not going to think like if they've read Morningstar and then weeks later or even days later they read Denizen, they're not going to be like, oh, this is that this color looks the same. They're probably not going to catch that. But so really nice job from him there. But it plays like a really important part in like establishing like this eerie vibe, and that's to me the type of horror stuff. I don't need like this like. I feel like when people talk about horror, it's always like gore. Like that's the first thing. Like whether or not you like it or don't like it, I feel maybe more so people who don't like it, because I feel like whenever I talk to my wife about it, because she does like horror-ish stuff, but the gore for her is always like whenever we talk about that, that's not my interest either. Like I'm not looking for crazy violent stuff all the time. Like I like possession stuff, so we're dealing with some like contortion that's a little uncomfortable. But I don't need like Texas Chainsaw Massacre is not something that's going to necessarily bring me in. I like the eerie shit, the uncomfortable shit that's like the silence and the power that is in that of what can be done or what's about to be done, that carries so much more weight where I don't necessarily need to see the action happen on screen. In comics, I do want to see it happen on the panels, but this is very much like this fits that vibe for me. This is eerie, and that is because of Chris Sheehan's art, because of Jason Wordy's color style and his approach here. And then, of course, like just the story in itself, some awesome stuff from Tim and DB. We talk about them a ton, and they got more cooking. Of course, I'm very excited to see what they have planned next. But Denizen, if you're looking for stuff to pick up this spooky season, this came out in trade not too long ago, so you should be able to get your hands on it.
And Tim and DB, if you're listening and you want to send us any free shit, advanced stuff, I'll read it all, baby.
Yeah, that is true. I'm not gonna not read it. But yeah. So and then and this would be like in terms of like movie or show, like being a limited series, very much think movie. Like I know with yours, I was like, I don't know, just based on the way you're talking about it, because it felt like it could be a limited series as well. To me, this would definitely be best suited as a movie, 100%, because of how tight it is with the storytelling. But
Perfect.
that does it. That is we have finished part 1 of spooky season 2024. We as far as you and I both know, we are continuing forward with spooky season part 2 next week with some more horror type books to talk about this month, right?
Yeah, TLDR spooky season part 2. Wait, how do I want to say this?
For the day.
Folle et deux or folle et don't. Am I right?
Yeah,
Ugh. Yeah,
apparently not
yeah.
great, Bob. But that is a conversation for another day. Until next week, stay sexy.
And keep reading. Come on, Nicholas. Come on. Come on.